Hello everyone, it's Judy here from Doodlecraft. It's lovely to be here again. Today I'm going to show you some simple craft and folk art techniques to make some cards for Valentine's Day. You don't need much equipment, but I'll show you what you need. So if you want, you can craft along with me, and at any time you can always pause the video and continue it at another time. So let's get started. So here we are ready to start. You will need something to make dots with. Now, here I have a dotting tool or a nail art tool. This is a lovely one which has quite a fine end and then a thicker end. Or you might use the end of a pencil and the pointed end. You'll also need to make some of the cards. You'll need a round brush and a flat brush. I've also got a stencil brush. You could use an old makeup brush, or you could use cotton buds or a bit of kitchen towel or a bit of rag to do some dabbing. I have got some kitchen towel today for making sure my dotting tool is clean. You'll need a piece of cardboard, which I've cut into the shape of a heart, and then some paint. Now I've got some deco art paint, which I find very useful because it's quite thick, but tester pots are fine. Any paint that's really quite thick, any acrylic paint, is also fine to use. The main colours you need are the brown, the green, the red, and the white. Then you'll need your cards and paper, and I would recommend doing some practicing as well first. And I also have a piece of greaseproof paper and then just a lid to keep my paints nice and fresh, and that way I don't waste any. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is just to go around my heart shape with a pencil very lightly. And then I'm going to start by using my tool that I'm going to use to create some dots. Now, whatever you're using, try and have a bigger end and then a smaller end. So that might be a nail, it could be your pencil, whatever you're using, you're going to start by using the bigger end of your tool. I'm just going to dip this into my paint. I'm going to do 2 dots close together, almost side by side. And I'm going to use the narrower end of my tool to pull those dots to make a heart. And that's all there is to it to make the hearts. 2 dots side by side, pull in like that. 2 dots, pull to the point. So what you're doing is you're putting the 2 larger dots either side of your pencil line, and then as you draw them together, you're drawing it towards that pencil line. Do a couple more. As we get round the corner, you'll see. There you go, 2 dots, and go towards either side of your line. Now I'm going to continue all the way around. You'll see I've got a couple of little tiny splodges there. I'm not going to worry about that. I always say there's no mistakes in folk art, just happy accidents. And I'm just going to put a couple of little hearts in the middle. We can also put some writing in the middle as well, but I'll show you that as we carry on. I do know people panic about writing and they go, oh, my writing's not good enough. But there's a very, very simple way of using just lines and dots, which anybody can do. And it really does enhance your cards. So I'm going to go now on to time lapse, and I'm going to continue to do this all the way around and show you when I've finished. There we go. So that's the card. And then you can use the same kind of techniques to do part of your envelope. Here's my card and here's my envelope. So I've just put a small heart on the back of the envelope. Now with the card, I was talking about putting in some writing. So a very simple I love you, for example, could be done with a couple of dots and then a line. And the more sort of higgledy-piggledy and up and down you do this, the better. There you are. Really, really simple. Obviously, try to get the writing so that the middle of your lettering goes in the middle of your shape, if you can. But if that's not possible, or if you think, oh, actually there's a bigger space there, then you can just go back to your hearts and add another couple in. And that way you can balance things out. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go back in with the smaller end of my tool, and I'll just add a little heart or two on this side. Just to balance things out. And there you have it. No stress, no worry. Easy peasy crafting. Anyone can do it. So that's the first of our cards that we're going to do today. So this is the next card we're going to do. And it has a little outline of a heart, which is done with the stencil brush. And then the roses and leaves are done with the dotting tool. And I also have, again, a matching envelope. So the first thing we're going to need for this is, again, our heart shape that we're going to put in the middle of our card and draw around it. And you're not going to see this pencil outline because we're going to stencil all over it. Now, you could choose to mix the red and the white on a mixing palette, or you might want to do it straight onto the card. I'm going to have a go with the mixing palette. And as I said, my mixing palette is very simple. It is just a piece of greaseproof paper, which once you're absolutely finished with everything, it's so easy because all you do then is just throw away the palette completely, but also you can just pop a lid over the top overnight, and that will keep your paints quite liquid until the next day. Now I'm going to be using the red and the white again, so I've put on quite a bit onto the palette. And all I'm going to do is just take a little bit of the white and a tiny bit of the red and mix the two together. A little bit more red. I don't want to make it too dark because otherwise you won't see the roses on the top. Now with the stencil brush, you want to start with it being fairly dry, and then you can dab all the way around that. Now that's got quite a lot of paint on it, probably enough to use for the whole of the heart. That's okay. Yeah. Just going to make that a little bit thicker and a little bit wider. And then once it's dry, it's ready for the roses. And now my pink is fairly dry. I'm going to start to do the roses, and I'm going to use a blob of red and a blob of white, placing them quite close together. Now, because I'm used to doing this, I'm going to do several at once, but you might like to start by doing one at a time. Dry your colours, dry your tool in between every one so you don't mix them too soon. But as I say, I'm going to do a few at once. So I'm going to put quite a large blob of red. And then dry my tool and then pick up some white, and then just beside it, I'm going to do a blob of white beside it. And having done that, I'm then going to use the smaller end of my tool, the smaller point of whatever it is that you're using, and I'm going to swirl the two. Now, there's no right or wrong way to do this. It's entirely up to you. Sometimes I've started from the middle and swirled into the outside, or the other way around. But what you do is you just collect the paint from one colour into another. And they'll all be different. But their nature's different as well, so that's fine. There you go. So that's the first part of your roses, and you can carry on all the way around doing this. And then after that, you can use your technique that you used with the hearts to do leaves. Now you might want to do full heart. So you could do 2 blobs and then drag it down. So you've got kind of a leaf shape heart, or a heart leaf shape. Or you might just do one single one and then pull And if you want to, you could take it into a finer point, perhaps curve it round. And it could be quite adventurous with that. Do some smaller leaves. Attach it to your rose if you wanted to, with a little tiny mark. And then once I've done this, I will then finish it off by going back to the reds and the whites and just doing some tiny little dots, a bit like gypsophilia. Quite random. So I'm going to go now on to time lapse and finish off the roses and the leaves and the embellishments all the way around. So there you go. Now you could leave it there, or if you fancy adding a little bit more, you could use a darker green and a very, very fine brush and just paint on the veins in the leaves. But as I say, you could leave it there. It's got quite a nice vintage feel to this card, I think. With this one, I've got a very fine, very tiny brush. And I'm just painting on a little vein in the middle of each. But it's not necessary. You could leave it just as it is. I'll just go around the edge and I'll be back to show you the next one. There we go. And as I say, you could always add an envelope as well. Now, if you feel that the heart shape is too elaborate for an envelope, maybe do a curving vine and then put your roses going up one side or down the bottom of the envelope. It's just there to give you some ideas. Right, on to our next card. So here we are with our next card, and as you can see, it uses the same kind of technique, but we're adding on a little pot at the bottom. So it's kind of a heart-shaped topiary, but we're going to add a little bow and the pot and just change the colours. So I'm going to very quickly go over this, as we've already learnt that technique, and spend a bit more time on doing the pot at the bottom. And I've added, with the envelope, I've added the same design on the side. So here I am, ready to draw around my topiary. Now, as I'm going to put a pot at the bottom, I'm going to move the shape up nearer to the top of my card, just to give the pot a bit of breathing space. And this is exactly the same as before. I'm going to use my stencil brush, or you can use a piece of rag, or you can use a cotton bud or a cotton wool ball, something like that that's going to give you a stippled effect. And I'm going to move a bit of white paint across and a tiny bit of light green. And that's probably enough. That's probably all I'm going to need to do all the way around the heart. And if you want to vary it a bit, make sure your brush is dry, and then you can add slightly darker greens here and there. Just to vary the effect. Right. So now I'm ready to do the roses as I did before. So I shall go on to time lapse for that part and show you when I finished. So now we're going to move on to the topiary pot at the bottom. If you're not confident, you could take a pencil and draw it in, or you could do it freehand. It's totally up to you. I'm going to use a flat brush for this because I'm going to use almost a single stroke or two on the sides. But if you haven't got a flat one, then a round brush is fine. It's just going to take more strokes and this will look smoother, I feel. So I'm going to take my brown paint and I'm going to start off by doing the rim, which will be a little bit bigger than the pot itself. I'm starting off on one side and trying to match up as much as I can to the other. And then I'm just going to take a little bit of white, which I'm going to put on the tip of my brush and pop that in the middle. And then with a dry brush, I'm going to spread it from one side to the other. So I'm moving the brown into the white and the white into the brown. And blending it in. Then I'm going to go back and add the pot underneath. And before I start, I'm just going to use my brush and just smooth it out on my greaseproof paper so that I know I've got quite a good point on the side of the brush. And you can see I'm trying to follow the curve of a pot. Just going to turn that round. It's just because I'm left-handed and I find it easier to do part of it upside down. So I'll pass that on to you. You may or may not find that useful to you. It's not quite right, but it's nearly there. So I'm just going to refine it a little bit more. Add a bit more brown in my brush. I want to keep the paint flowing as much as I can with this, because it helps when I add the light on the top. Then I'm going to do the same as I did for the rim and just add a little bit of white to the tip of my brush, and then I'm going to go all the way down the middle, dry my brush off, and then spread the white paint on one side and then the other. Now I could play around with that for quite a while until it's dry, but always trying to make the brush strokes follow the line of the pot. And then I'm going to take a little bit of the brown and just pop a little bit of soil inside. Now you can change the colour of that, maybe add a darker tone. But by the time you get the bow on, it's not going to show a great deal. So having done the pot, I'm now going to go to my fine brush, my round shaped brush, and I'm going to do a little bow. Now this is sort of practice for the next thing we're going to do, which is sort of like a C stroke, or some people call it a comma stroke. And so you're going to go around one way and then the other, starting with a very fine line and then pressing your brush down, and then start with the fine line again and press the brush down, and then do a wiggly line for the other part. So I shall show you with the red paint. Now you can do this with two tones, so you could do a bit of red and a bit of white, but just to start with, I'm just going to show you with a single colour. So I'm going to start by putting a very light bit of pressure on my brush and then pressing down so that it gets a little bit wider, and then take that off. Then I'm going to do that again for the other part of the bow. Start very, very lightly, then press the brush down so that the stroke gets wider at the end. So you've got half of your bow, and then do the other half. This time I'm going to do it the other way around. This is very good for brush control. So this time I'm going to start off pressing down and then releasing the brush. And then again the other way. Press down and then release the brush. Now you might like to practice that on a piece of paper before you actually do it on your pot, just to get some ideas. So I'm going to show you that in a minute when we call the roses, about how you might practice those kind of lines. So then in the middle, I'm going to start off by pressing down and then releasing, and then press down again to go the other way, and then releasing to do the bow at the end. And the other way, I'm going to make this a slightly different shape, as bows sometimes are. So press down and release, and then press down and release again. Yeah. And then just to finish that little bit off, once it's dry, I'm going to go back in and put a little bit of white as a highlight, just where the light might touch on one or the other side. So I'm going to put a tiny line at the top. This side. And then a little bit on the bow. There we go. So there you have a heart-shaped topiary bush. And we've completed our next Valentine's card. Now, this final card uses a slightly different technique. It uses the comma or the C stroke, for which you use a round brush. And then these leaves are done by moving the round brush up and down. But as it takes some practice, we're going to get some paper and have a go at doing the comma stroke first before we tackle the card. So here we are with our round brush, which has gone to a fine point, and our palette of colours. And what we're going to do is to coat the brush, can roll it around in the paint, making sure you keep that fine point of the brush. And then we're going to start, depends if you're right-handed, start from the left. If you're left-handed, start from the right so you don't smudge as you go. And you're going to start by pressing down and then releasing your brush. Now you will find some irregularities, but that's okay. Just keep practicing. Down, press, and then release. Now mine hasn't quite got enough paint on it, so I'm going to put a bit more on. Press and release. That's better. But it needs to go to a finer point. Press and release. Now we're getting there. And I would say keep practicing this stroke, going straight down first. And when you're comfortable, maybe lengthen the strokes. And the other thing you can do is begin to take the strokes to the side. So I'll just carry on doing a few of those first of all. That's better. And now I'm going to do a row underneath, which start and curve around to the right. Now all of this takes practice, and if you haven't done it even for a few days, it's really worth getting back to doing it just on some paper before you attempt to do anything else. And having done it one way and twisted the brush, and then try it the other way. and you're bound to be better at one side than the other. And it's these curves that I'm going to use to do the roses. Now, the other thing you can practice is with your palette. You can either roll your brush and then dip it in the white, or you can dip it on one side. So you have kind of a two-tone brush. And then try that. And again, you could try it several times in a row. This makes beautiful petals eventually. And you see how the white is coming out. And you could try dipping your brush in the paint every time, or you could try letting the brush run out. You could also try putting the brush with the tip coated with white as well. And I would do a lot of these to practice this technique. Vary the thickness and learn how you're going to control the brush. When you've done some of these and you feel more comfortable, you might like to start doing one comma stroke one way and then another one just outside it. So this is the start of your rose design. So you go one way with your curve and then start another one. And decide where you're going to put your next one. I think I'm going to put it just to the side of this one. And can you see how the rose starts to form? Don't forget you can vary the colours, making them more or less intense as you go out to the sides. Now, it's this kind of technique that you'll see on canal boats, on barges and so on those lovely jugs and pots, and on Romany caravans. So again, I would have a really good practice of these kind of techniques before you approach your roses on your cards. And when you've had a go at your roses and you're comfortable with those, I would then go on to have a look at the leaf shapes. And again, you can do those varying the colours. And you can start simply by, one here I think, just doing half a leaf, pressing down and then releasing. And then maybe adding a bit of white onto the other side. Let's do that one again. Press down and release. And then press down and release on the other side. And then you can start to think about maybe doing leaves with more serrated edges. So you'd go very slight pressure and a bit more and a bit more and a bit more, waving your brush as you go. And then on the other side, same thing. Press and a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. Don't worry if they're different, doesn't matter. Every leaf is different in nature, so don't worry if one is different to the other. Let's do a few more of those for you before we tackle our card. So again, start with light pressure. Push out, push, come back to the middle, push out, and out again. And just slightly lighter green on the other side. Push, 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 push. And come back and just finish that bit off. As you can see, if the paint runs out, just go back in again. Try and finish off with a little tiny stem. And I haven't changed my brush, still the same round brush that I've used to do the leaves. I'm just using very minimal pressure, so I've got just 1 or 2 hairs of the brush on the paper. So there's my practices. Now I'm going to get on to do the final card. So with this card, I've started off with a larger rose and then added others as I felt appropriate. For the envelope, I've just put a single rose in the corner. But I never really know until I get going how it's going to turn out. So this next one may be entirely different. Let's see how it goes. So I'm going to start off this card, I think, with the rose, with the main rose in the middle. And I'm going to start off by pressing down to try and do quite a small comma stroke in the centre. And then I'm going to do another one going the other way. Press down and release. Now I tend to rotate my cards as I do this, just purely because otherwise I tend to cover it up with my hand and smudge some of the lines. So you will see this one go round and round, but hopefully you'll see the pattern start to form. And I've decided with this one, I'm going to try and make the outer petals a little bit lighter. We'll just see how that works out. This stroke is also very nice for other plants where you can have all the strokes going downwards, or you can do daisies with all the petals going outwards. It's a very versatile stroke to learn. Once you've learnt it, you can apply it to many different things. Right, I think that's enough on my main flower. So now I think I'm going to add a couple of leaves, and maybe some smaller flowers at the bottom. So here we have a little selection of Valentine's cards. I hope you have some fun, enjoy, don't stress about it, have a lovely time. Remember, everybody is different, everybody paints in a completely different way. Take the ideas and have lots of fun doing it. And I hope to see some of the outcomes. Do let me know how you get on. Until next time, bye.